And we are live. Hi, everybody. Welcome to More Insights and Strategy, the Enterprise App Podcast. This is episode number 21 and our first for 2016. I'm Melody Brue and I'm joined by Robert Kramer. How are you, Robert?
I'm good. I still can't believe it's 2026, but
I know.
it's gonna be a
I
great year.
know. It's funny. Every time I write it or I think about it, I have to wait, is that right? Am I right on that? I think this 2025 may have been the fastest year in my lifetime of it went by so quickly. And I think each year, but at this stage in my life, every year for the next 3 years, I have a kid going to college. And so it's it goes by so quick. It's, it's just life. But sometimes it's wait, slow down.
I thought it was the biggest deal when we hit year 2000 because I was so weird to have that 2 there. And
Yes,
now here we are, these years are just flipping, and
I know.
I'm happy that my hair is still there, but, it's as we get older and it doesn't excite me as much as it used to, but what I'm excited about is technology and how it's really just it's moving so quick, it's exciting to be a part of it.
Yeah, that's funny that you said that at 2000. It would be really interesting to do a look back from technology then to now, but we'll save that for another time. Um, for our listeners, if you haven't seen the More Insights and Strategy annual predictions, we published something on our website. It's under the weekly insights. And it's also in our newsletter. Each analyst took a couple of predictions in their swim lanes. And so we're going to cover a couple of those. We actually chose 6 because of 2026. See, I like 2006. Are we in 2006? I have a kid who was born in 2006. But so one of your predictions is why 2026, I have trouble saying that, is a turning point in ERP and SCM. But in your predictions, and I think some of the other analysts did this as well, you kind of did a little bit of a look back. I made some assumptions in mind that people are somewhat kind of understand the context, but I think especially for ERP and SCM, people probably don't have as much context unless they work directly in that sector. So before we get to 2026, what did 2025 really establish for ERP and SCM in your view?
Sure. I think it's marking the end of experimentation with AI, that it's actually going to be more embedded, and instead of experimentation, more the system of action with that. Lots of times, ERP's been noted as the system of record, and now we're trying to use AI to be moving beyond testing with AI features and starting to run those agents across full flows, and forecasting is an example, or replenishment of products, or planning from a purchase procurement perspective, or quote to cash. So agents to more handle routine tasks and exceptions, while humans focus on oversight, judgment, accountability, more from the strategic perspective.
I think that's broadly how we're seeing a lot of AI, but what in the ERP and SCM realm, what had to change from a technology standpoint, kind of under the hood, for that to change?
Yeah, and I think the architecture of ERP is shifting. Instead of batch driven system of record, it's going event driven, more system of action. So the systems begin to react more in real time on the shop floors, the supplier network, logistics, the customers. IoT is getting more involved. IIoT is getting involved as well, streaming data across core components of the planning and execution. So we're seeing the agentic AI get more involved for real time actions to happen.
So how does this influence what comes next?
And that's a good question. I think it's modernization. Many organizations, they're maintaining these legacy systems, and they become expensive. And I've talked a little bit about how it's the cost of maintaining versus the cost to modernize is more expensive to maintain. I think companies need to realize that they can go in baby steps and phases, like we talk about. You don't have to go 0 to 100 overnight. Go 0
Yeah.
to 1. Start putting things in place, because if you don't, your competition is, and these systems are competitive advantages, and you have to um, be mainstream in order to be successful and be competitive with your peers.
So what do you see as the big change in 2026?
I think it's the system of action, event driven, more intelligence. Um, the industry 5.0 that I talk about a lot, which is collaboration of humans and robots, but getting change management more to the forefront, where humans are repositioned to be strategic, so they understand more how they're going to be used in this flow, instead of feeling like they have to worry about their job. I think there's a huge need for the strategy component of the human in the loop.
Mhm. That's a conversation for another time too, is that I wonder if people are as worried this time of year, as worried this year as they were this time of year last year about AI taking jobs. My sense is no, but
I think people always worry about their jobs, and I think it's just another component to worry about it. But if they're, I think we talk about how you have to understand what AI can do for your company and how you use it, then I think it will position that person a little bit better to be more useful in this new or this next generation of systems, because things are changing. Change has to happen, no matter whether it's ERP or data or SaaS or workforce or anything. Everything
mm,
changes because these companies, it's about them. They have to make money, and they're trying to find every area where they can be more efficient and more competitive. And these are just innovation opportunities for them to take advantage of.
yeah. So when you talk about kind of what Industry 5.0, why that matters, let's kind of wrap this up with what's the big takeaway here and what companies need to know moving forward.
Yeah, it's really it's the next generation of ERP aligned with Industry 5.0. It's a more automated, intelligent, human centric. So AI and machine learning are embedded for prediction. Things are built around platforms where APIs are used to connect to other platforms. It's the next generation where humans are in the loop, and ERP is event driven. So I
Good
think that
topic. Good prediction. We'll be watching it.
yep, it's a great prediction. So we have some predictions that you have, and I think that as we run through this, we'll kind of like flip back and forth. But
Yeah, that's a
you
good
talk,
good
yeah,
plan.
you talk a little bit about voice and first enterprise. So we'll kind of ask a little bit about that. So we've seen voice AI make huge strides lately. So you're predicting that by 2020 in 2026. um, isn't it just an add-on, or it's going to be the default way that we interact with our businesses? So what's the big shift that you're seeing from this?
I think the biggest shift is that we're finally treating voice as the rich data source that it can be, right? So if you think about the most important parts of business, like negotiations, brainstorm, even interviews, all happen through conversation. Right now, so much of that data is dark. It disappears the minute that the meeting ends, or you rely on people's memories to make notes, or people are making notes while they're having the conversation, which isn't great either. So I think my big prediction in terms of voice is that it's going to become the interface that captures this kind of what I refer to as conversational capital and turns it into more structured, actionable intelligence.
So is it's less about speech to text and more about speech to action, or
Yes. I mean, think about the way that people are starting to use voice now. Even your remote control has voice. Alexa was, oh God, now my Alexa is going to start talking to me. Alexa was early on with that Siri. Now people have gotten really used to that. And when I use Perplexity on my phone, or if I use, I mean, many of the AI tools that I use, I try to use voice instead of typing because if you think about it, I can talk at 150 words per minute, but I can type at 50 or whatever, however fast you type. I type pretty
that's
fast
so
actually.
true. Yep.
And so much of our time is spent, in cars or on the go. And so I had a briefing with Salesforce yesterday, and they're adding a lot of this voice into the voice UI into Salesforce because people think about it for sales. People are on the go. They can't drive and make notes, and they may not put that directly into a CRM, and so that data is missing. So I think what we're talking about in your referral to speech to text versus speech to action is that we're kind of killing this documentation tax. So that data entry. So when voice is the primary UI, that goes away. And so a sales rep can finish a call, and the AI has already updated the CRM, maybe even drafted the follow-up, flagged action items. So it's a big productivity unlock. And if you think about it from a consumer perspective, think about stuff like zero-click shopping, like the thing I just mentioned. I don't want her to start talking. I can order something on Amazon without having to click anything. I can just speak to the thing over
It's
there.
fantastic.
But if you look about, when we see real consumer adoption on things, you mostly often can see that the enterprise adoption will follow.
I think you're right about that, and I think it's also a little bit of change for people. I think it's massively more efficient um, and probably easier for us to do. I actually been using the voice to text on my Google Maps in my car. Instead of
Yeah,
like type, blah, 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 and so
yeah,
it's like seconds.
yeah.
And so is the ROI that obvious? What's stopping every company from doing this? Or is there a change management because it is better and it is easier and the writing's on the wall, but we don't want to do it for some reason.
It's both. So there's sort of this activation paradox. So the tech is great, but sometimes the current UI is clunky. So if you have to navigate through different menu layers, you've got to enable your mic, you've got to check a privacy box. The friction cancels out the benefit of it. And so to get the productivity gains, the activation has to be invisible. So
Mhm.
think about, everybody's talking about, and at CES, there was so much of this, the AI PC. And, with the introduction most recently of Hey Copilot, activating that. It's funny because I have to be careful about what I say because I don't want to activate certain things. On this Cisco device that I use, if I say a certain thing, um, the device will tell me what my next meetings are, all the things. So activating with voice, and not having to click through a bunch of things, that's going to get people to that. So think like the physical hardware buttons, like a one click instead of a click to multiple things. Think of, if the instant wake words, like the ones I had just talked about, that's how we'll get people using this and be more comfortable. And like I said, from a consumer adoption standpoint, people are already doing it. You talk to your remote, you
Right.
talk to the thing to order stuff. You're now using it on Amazon to create grocery lists and buying lists, and even getting recommendations. I mean, in retail, it's like you can ask all these questions, get the recommendations, which is so much of where search is going. And then you don't even have to go to a website and buy it. It'll just buy it for you because you have this shopping assistant. So there's a lot here.
And that retail situation is a great conversation later. How technology has transformed retail that is been like amazing over the years. So just to know this,
Yes.
but this is part of that whole innovation that you're kind of discussing. But
Yeah.
when you mentioned UI being a barrier, which I think I agree because that's a big component when you're going business to consumer. But it's also business to business. So how do companies make always available voice feel safe rather than somewhat intrusive?
Yeah, I mean, everything has to be about control, right? So, like, if people want it, um, it should be really easy to activate. If somebody doesn't want it, or maybe they think it's listening to them, everybody thinks everything is listening to them. I don't know how much I'm
And
concerned about that. Maybe if I'm having a really sensitive conversation, I need to turn that off. I think in a lot of these sales tracking applications where people are having private conversations, so much of that relationship building and everything that salespeople are responsible for, they don't necessarily want that captured, right? So
Mm.
being able to easily have the controls at your fingertips or even by voice activation, I think that's the thing. But I think really what we have to look for is everything is in small steps, right? Like, so look at where people are drowning in documentation, whether it's sales or HR, solve the activation friction there. And then that serves as sort of a proof point for where it goes next. And I think, like I said, the consumer adoption is serving as a proof point already that people will use it if they have it. So my that kind of, wrapping up the prediction is that voice is our original interface. So I think that work tools are going to catch up with how we actually communicate. So I'm excited about it because I see so many different places where this could come out. And it's
Right.
Hey Copilot was a great example of that over the holidays that was launched. But I'm even seeing OEMs starting to look at changes to devices. It's not just voice activation, but actually, where are things on your computer that change because you're now using voice as a primary interface? So there's a lot of opportunity here, and I'm excited to follow it. So,
Me
next
too.
topic, enterprise data foundations for 2026. How many times am I going to say that? 2026. Anyway, and like I mentioned before, you kind of started your predictions with a little bit of a look back. So, what did 2025 put in place on the data side that will make your 2026 predictions possible?
I think it was about consolidating data and understanding that your data needs to be trusted. The companies need a data management strategy, bringing all the different elements of different types of data, whether it's operational, analytics, um, where the data is coming from, the different sources, looking at your technology stacks of where data is and what matters with the proper governance to take advantage of using that data with AI and agents, and so you don't have fragmented data and data that you need to be reliable, so you could use it from an automation perspective for all these modern systems that require it, which I think is a big deal. So I think companies now understand that if they don't have a data problem, um, they most likely probably, if they don't think they have a data problem, they most likely do. And to take advantage of AI, they need to understand, kind of the architecture to the finish line of using AI, where it starts and stops.
Just when you said if they don't have a data problem, I was going to say then they're wrong because almost everybody does. And that's no fault of like where we started, right? Because the technology has changed. And so, of course, how we access and use the data is going to change. But part of that is that AI is now showing up inside the data platforms, not just on top of them, right?
Right. So, teams can't manually, tag the data and fix the data, and platforms need to begin using AI to automate, to classify, to generate metadata, detect policy risk, and flag anomalies to reduce the day to day friction. Governance needs to be running autonomously, continuously, so teams can document and actually get to the point where data is going to be more useful in the day to day. When we was talking a little bit about the system of record to the system of action, inside that domain of ERP, it shows that if the data wasn't as useful as the system of record as it would be the system of action, because you wanted to have the foresight to actually help you make predictions, do different things, and it can't do that if the data is wrong. I'm not sure why companies don't understand that the data is the key to successful AI, and because it has to feed off of something, and if it's not feeding, it's not going to be able to be successful.
I think they understand that. I think it's just a matter of acting on it.
Yeah.
And the tools are getting a lot better. I mean, we look at, we talk about Box a lot. The way that they've been able to kind of extract from documents, and that's one form of data, but there's a lot of unstructured data and structured data that they can extract things from, including metadata that they weren't able to do before, companies that is.
Right.
So with tools like Box and others, this is becoming a lot easier, and so it should be less of a problem moving forward. But obviously, there's a bunch of big leaps that companies need to make before they can make or a bunch of small leaps that companies need to make before they can make the full big leap into AI, because the data has to be better, right? So one of the things that you pointed out in your prediction is digital twins. So let's talk a little bit about the digital twin
Yeah,
helping solve this problem.
and it can. So digital twins run continuously on live data. And an example, like order data, inventory levels, supplier commitments. So to run an example of that, so if a port delay or supplier disruptions occur, teams can actually simulate alternatives to reroute those shipments or adjust production schedules or reallocate inventory before actually making that change in the real system. So that's a real key, because the twin isn't a separate project. It's part of your everyday planning and using the same data to feed analytics and AI and helping teams make faster decisions and be confident with what they're doing. So it's a realistic example of what should be happening in these systems and these platforms.
Yeah, I remember we were both at the Oracle event in Redwood Shores, the analyst event, and they showed that kind of digital twin simulation of weather patterns and then how things would be rerouted and everything. It's a really sophisticated system, but it's also just really cool. It's like,
Yeah.
wow, that's pretty amazing. I kind of wish that somebody had done that with FedEx over the holidays, because I had just package nightmares left and right. I'm not a big shopper. Like, I hate to go to malls. Oh my God, Nick will tell you, like, anytime anyone wants to go shopping, I'm like, what? Why would you want me to do that? So I very heavily rely on data on these websites and from these shipping providers to be correct. And then if there's a weather delay or if there's something happening, just get my stuff to me on time, please, or have better
Yep.
expectations for what it is. But anyway, moving on to our next topic, the vision. Whoops. Okay, I'm trying to make sure that we've got our little banners up, but doing multiple things at once. So, computer vision. I think we're going to see a big boom in how computer vision is used in buildings and facilities and for meetings. So computer vision is really moving out of what we look at now basically as a video tile, into the literal walls of buildings. One of the biggest kind of in-person examples of this that I've seen is the Cisco building here in Austin. It really becomes sort of like this nervous system of the facility strategy. So looking at everything from employee experience to operational bottom lines. So this is important for lots of reasons. I think as companies are kind of navigating this return to office mandate, and we saw this flip flop a lot. I'm seeing it's more sticking now than it was the first time companies tried doing it. I know a lot of people who are back to the office, at least part time. But I think in 2026, we're going to see computer vision not see, no pun intended, but not just about seeing people in a meeting, but it's really a bridge between the physical space and the digital systems. So vision integrated buildings, the same camera that may ensure meeting equity for a remote worker is also going to be a sensor that can reduce energy costs, automate security. It's like this ultimate multi-use asset.
Well, that's a lot of information, and it sounds it sounds well, it sounds about on par. So if you start with like the meeting experience where we just been, you got like 20 people, it's just their head or whatnot. So we'll go from the floating head on the screen while there's other people potentially on site too, to people in the room. So how does 2026 technology fix those people remotely as just the floating head?
So there's a lot of technology out there already that's doing this. The kind of what you would consider maybe the big three on the meeting device software, or not software, hardware is, well, it's software. It takes software and hardware actually. So Cisco, Microsoft, Zoom, and others, they're standardizing this for more of meeting equity. So if you look at Cisco's Room OS 26 or Microsoft IntelliFrame, the camera doesn't just show like this wide shot of a boardroom. I hate being on the other end of those calls. You're like, I
Yep.
don't really see who's talking, and it's hard when that happens because so much of what our interaction is like seeing the other person looking like they have something to say, or maybe they started talking and then you started talking but you didn't see that they were talking because the sound delay or something. So
Yep.
it's really about meeting equity, and it's not just about like the people who are in the room versus the people who are remote, but it levels the playing field for everybody because everybody kind of looks like they can look like they have their own dedicated tile. Cameras can automatically focus on the person who's talking as at the same time as having a view of the room so that you kind of feel like you're there. So it really levels the playing field and it allows AI to track who said what in the meeting. So that's a big thing about, what do we do after the meeting? It's not just like meeting and then the meeting's over and there's no work to be done.
Well, I know you talked a little bit about efficiency and how the technology, could pay for itself, and
Mhm.
how, so how do we get from a video call to a lower electricity bill, or is it even important?
It is. This is actually the ROI that the CFOs and the facilities managers love because you can have things think about the computer vision is able to see who's in the room, how many people are in the room versus like it knows there's some motion or they don't know if it's 20 people or two people. So with the computer vision, they can actually see how many people are in the room. And we can talk a little bit more about the privacy of that in a second. But it's not just about the occupancy density. That's a whole lot. Um, but you can see energy savings up to like 40% of just from cooling alone because there are sort of these eyes already built into the conference room. So then you combine the sensors with the computer vision, and there are so many ways to improve the quality of the environment and the operations.
So if we pivot a little bit to safety, you talked about how secure these environments are, and that they're complex. So do you have a concrete example of this in action about how this can needs to be more secure or less secure, or it's on par?
So the security part of it, and what I was referring to, was really more about securing the building and the people.
Got it.
And one of my favorite examples of this, and I'm sure it caught my eye, because Lenovo did this whole project with cognition, and they did it their first, oh, and Qualcomm was part of it as well. Their first implementation of this was actually at a very small day school. It's a K through 12 school in La Jolla, California, a tiny little
Mhm.
private school that I happened to graduate from. So, of course, when they sent me this case study, I was like, wait, La Jolla Country Day? I went to La Jolla Country Day. So I can actually like picture the buildings and all the things as I'm talking about this, but it's a really great example of how using these kind of cameras and the brains behind it to allow the detection of weapons, unauthorized license plates,
Mm.
even like what they refer to as like large crowd formations in real time. These are really like they're small things and they're pretty simple. They didn't have to replace the cameras. They just basically added the brains at the edge using
Pretty
Lenovo's
cool.
Think Edge platform. So it 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 does there's a lot of opportunity here beyond this little use case of La Jolla Country Day School. If you picture it in retail environments, any place where there are a large number of people. Um, I like the example of hospitals. The
Mhm.
violence in hospitals is on the rise, and this technology could very quickly detect the types of patterns that they detect the same on campus. When somebody's moving quickly towards another person, it's usually not a good thing. When there's large groups gathering, that usually is not a good thing, and sometimes that's a good thing. But what they can detect certain things that lead to outcomes that they know that need to be de-escalated. So I really like this,
That is a big deal.
this
Everything
example
you
of
just said.
forward.
So if a leader is looking, we go to wrap up this section, is the leaders looking at their office footprint today? What's a day one move they're going to make for 2026?
Don't treat it as a camera project. This is an infrastructure project. It's I think there's 2 places where you would start on this. One is in existing, environments. That I would say, like, start by upgrading high traffic meeting zones to support things like intelligent
Mhm.
director that I talked about. Once you prove that out, then scale that vision intelligence to security, building management. In new construction, I would say facilities leaders need to be looking at ways, thinking ahead to ways that they can maximize space and operations and how this will use, whether it's sensors for HVAC and occupancy and but also meeting room availability, everything, and even power sources. I mean, there's so much to look towards for, in the next year or so, but I think this is a really hot space, and I'm excited to follow.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for that. Great, exciting. And we got couple other ones left here. One's data
Yeah.
protection, preparing for more autonomous resilience.
Yep. So my same kind of question, I guess, is what changed in 2025 that really sets this up for 2026 for your prediction?
Yeah, so protection moved more from backup to resilience. So in 2025, driven platforms started detecting these anomalies,
Mm,
understanding the blast radius, suggesting recovery actions. This was in real time. So I think companies are going to be more defensive there, and AI has been more involved in helping detecting these issues on a regular basis.
and you've talked a lot about, and Paul on our team as well talks a lot about quantum risk. It seems like in nearly every briefing on security lately, um, quantum is a big focus as well. Why is that showing up now? What's happening with that?
I think enterprises are finally thinking that this is a reality, that this can happen. So for more regulated and sensitive data, I think companies, instead of going quarter by quarter, they're going by years to look at the risk that
Mhm.
quantum could actually, the reality of it. So what it is the future of quantum computers could break today's encryptions. And that's what the problem is, that they have to be prepared for these things. So even if that capability is years away, data stolen today can be decrypted later, right? And so
Mm.
that's a really scary part right there. So why crypto agility and post quantum readiness are becoming architectural concerns. That's more today than there are from a research perspective.
I think that's right. I think that when I first started hearing about quantum in not like this totally obscure way, was from the leaders at Wells Fargo who were already really thinking ahead several years ago about, quantum safe, um, security. So then where does this take us for 2026? What are you seeing?
Well, I see that there's a long-term protection here. So post-quantum, crypto helps ensure data remains secure across technology generations, especially archives, IP, regulated areas. Um, so as algorithms evolve, standards are still settling, and performance trade-offs exist. But resilience platforms need to become more autonomous, classifying data automatically. Um, these are signals that backup, recovery, governance, security, telemetry feed into shared post posture views. So 2026 enterprises won't just weather the storm, whether a platform works or not. They need to be clear, credible, have this quantum in their scope for the years to come, that they need to be quantum resilient. They need to have a roadmap for that. And as part of their vendor, evaluation. So I think it needs to be on their radar. They need to understand it, they're probably going to get hacked. They need to have the road to recovery quicker. Quantum needs to be in the picture. And this is a mainstay for the future of data protection. One of the things that, just to kind of throw a wrench in this, I think there's a gap that needs to be addressed that I think will be this year is between the different platforms, who owns that gap when data moves from one platform to another. So is it the movement to the new when you take the data from one platform to another platform, does that other platform have it, or the company that had the data in the first place, or the actual enterprise itself that's moving the data? And I think that's, as an example, SAP to Salesforce, who owns the data when it moves? The enterprise, SAP, or Salesforce? And I think that needs to be fixed for the year. And who owns it, I think, is a big component of this. And I think it will be addressed.
That's a juicy one because in order to even process the data, they have to have the kind of either temporary ownership of it. I see this in UC when basically when you make a call on any of the UC platforms or video, you have to consent to them basically owning that data in the time that it passes through their system. Otherwise, you could sue them for copyright loss. I mean, they're a copyright infringement. So that's a tricky one. I think
It is.
the reality is that the data has to be protected in every single step. Um, and I think that's where like you see, and again, I'll bring up Box as an example, just because I do so much in Box and with Box, but you know, you the data that you have, the actual files have to be protected, and then they can be used other places. There has to be backup there. There has to be that resiliency there. That it's just there are so many different layers. I think I guess the big takeaway for me is well, my big takeaway question for you is when people talk about quantum and all of that, like I'll admit, I think you might lose some people in terms of like, well, that's not happening to me. And large enterprises or big banks, and they're paying attention to that. But from an everyday user, and even a small business owner, medium-sized business owner, how does this change day-to-day security operations?
Well, it depends if the quantum computers are being used to actually do something with the data. So I think it's not a today thing necessarily. We have to bring Paul into the picture because he's more of an expert on this. But
Yeah,
the challenges, I think, make it a little bit more complex. Where when the quantum is being used, it can decrypt some of these this data where it's a potential problem. And I think if you have to have the resiliency for the quantum in play for your data protection. And I don't think I think that's the thing that it has to be on your roadmap. So how are you going to handle quantum, you know, and how is that on your map for data protection? And I think that that's part of the equation because some of the people's or the enterprise's data is sitting in different spots. So it's hard to actually answer that question 100%. But I think it has to match up with how your data is being protected and making sure it's quantum is in the mix. So hopefully that helps.
great. All right, on to our last topic, one that we've both talked a lot about this year and sustainability and how the conversation is changing. And I think in 2026, we're going to be having a bigger sustainability conversation around data centers and AI and how it's straining resources. So I think I would sort of put it as like it's a new era of responsible infrastructure, and that operational transparency that's going to be beyond a report. It's We're seeing legislation here in Texas. There's one example, but legal requirements. This is not just a CSR thing. You can move sustainability out of the we only talk about that in ESG circles, where it's been siloed by some companies for a while, and this is a real concern. So we're gonna we're gonna be having some conversations around this.
Well, so I love the topic of sustainability. We talk about it with data a lot, but So in this case, it feels like the honeymoon phase of build it and they will come for data centers is over. So what's the biggest signal that the ground is actually shifting here for data centers?
So one of the things, like I mentioned, in Texas, here where I live, Texas, they just introduced the Senate Bill 6. So it forces data centers to basically pay their own way for grid interconnection.
Mhm.
And the big part of this is they have to accept curtailment during emergencies. So I think data centers have been built sort of speculatively, and now they're going to have to be like mandatory coordination with regulators, like here in Texas with ERCOT. So there's going to be a big shift in how this is how the grid is assessed and stressed.
Well, that's super interesting. So mandatory curtailment. So the state can actually tell an AI company or an enterprise to turn off the power.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. So I mean, they have very clear kind of guidelines about when and how and what kind of notifications and things. It's not just like a, light switch that goes off, right? But if the grid is really stressed, the the AI training has to actually run these stops that they're calling them so that the hospital can stay on, neighborhoods can keep their air conditioning on. That doesn't sound like a big deal, but in Texas where it's 100 plus degrees in the summer, it can be. But it really is a shift, I think, in how we measure success with sustainability, because if we're using like power usage effectiveness as a comparison now, we're looking
Mhm.
at power to compute efficiency, water replenishment metrics. So if you're in a water stress region, neutrality isn't the benchmark anymore, right? You have to prove you're putting back more than that you take. So it's a it's a big. I think we'll be talking a lot about this for throughout the year, but the big shift with this legislation.
So you talked a little bit about Texas, and it's not just the Lone Star State issue. It's actually across the board with other states, correct?
Yes. So I mean, and we're only talking about the US here. Internationally, there's actually a whole other conversation around that. But in the US, Virginia, Georgia, Oregon are implementing kind of similar frameworks around this. Um, Virginia actually created a dedicated rate class for data centers so that the cost of building all of these new centers and even transmission lines don't get dumped into residential monthly bills. So this is um, this is companies having to take accountability for their power usage and also find better alternatives. And I think that's a good thing for both enterprises and for consumers, because consumers are seeing their bills go up because data centers are, it's the AI boom is an energy boom, if you put it that way. You think about it, like there's a lot of money to be made from these energy providers, but it shouldn't be passed on to like the everyday consumer at home.
Understood. So, as we kind of wrap up a little bit of our session here today, which has been fantastic. What's the make or break metric for the next 18 months as we start 2026 or January 9th? I mean, this is a interesting year to see things like this. What do you think that is?
I think there's two things. One, the CFO and the chief sustainability officer are now looking at the same dashboard. They're tracking power consumption per workload. They're not just tracking carbon emissions.
Mhm.
Um, they're You can't prove that your AI stack is sustainable without facing kind of these regulatory roadblocks or guidance. So I think the ones that are going to do thrive in this are the ones that view the grid just like we view our world as a shared asset. And that's more than just a power consumption thing, right? Like I think you have to look at how do we get through, and not around, but through and coordinate with with legislation and even communities to create a more sustainable environment. And to be honest, this is a big problem, right? But I'm glad that it's being addressed, because, and this is where I think the conversation shifts a lot, is that this isn't a it's not a polarizing issue in terms of, do you think global warming is real or not, or what do you think? It doesn't matter. Uh, we've talked a lot about like how you feel about something. Actually, it's important, right? But it's not. It's not important in this case. This is a matter of, if we want to scale AI, which I haven't heard any other than,
Sure.
consumers who say like, I'm sick of AI, I don't want it. Um, but if we want to scale productivity and safety, all the things that we've talked about over the past 5 predictions, we have to be able to scale the processing,
Yeah.
and that requires shared coordination and resources, so that this isn't about being green or hugging trees. I personally see nothing wrong with hugging trees. But we had that green hushing for a while after greenwashing, and now it's just a matter of, this is just a business conversation that has to be had.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, this has been great. So we starting the year, we have a lot of events to go to. What's on tap for you for this month and next month?
I actually don't have any work travel this month, which is a actual miracle. But I do get to go to California to see
Yay.
my son play in his first college baseball game. That'll be
That's
fun. Oh, actually, that's not true. I will be visiting some clients while I'm there and filming a video. So I lied about that. And then in February, I have Zoho Day here in Austin, and then Ring Central Analyst Summit in Scottsdale, Arizona, which will be lovely because it's not so hot this time of year. How about you? What's your travel looking
so
like?
I get started at the end of the month for Acumatica. Then I have a NetSuite Oracle event and SAP in February, and then I'll March. I think gets busy, and so does April. But I'm off to out of the gate in the next couple of months, starting at the end of this month, going to Seattle, New York, and Atlanta. I'm seeing Atlanta be on the list of cities this year, and I haven't seen it in the past that much. How about you? Have you?
I have not, and that's interesting. I spent probably the most time. I think 2 years ago it was Vegas, but this past year I spent the most time in Seattle that I have in many, many years, partially because of Amazon, but also other companies too. And I have really started to enjoy that city. I
It's a
really
fun,
like it.
and that's
Yeah.
where I'm going in a couple of weeks. But
And all right, well, I'll have to give you some of my favorite little restaurant recommendations because I've found them now that I've been there quite a bit.
well,
But
this was great. Episode 21, first one of 2026. I want to thank everybody for joining. Robert Kramer, Melanie Brue. Please like us. Tell us what you want to hear. Look at our social posts and comment. And we'll look forward to see you in the next couple of weeks on our next Enterprise Apps podcast. Thank you very much.
sounds good. Thanks.